Good day. I'm Jean Burns-Slater, and along with Ann Quinn, we co-chair the Civil Discourse Committee, and we welcome you to this Lunch with the League. We would like to thank our web leaders, Joanne Schultz and Kim Gravel, for facilitating this Lunch with the League, and this meeting is being recorded. Next slide, please. The Civil Discourse Committee's goal is to restore public trust in institutions and leaders by encouraging respectful interaction in public forums and by engaging in empathetic, courteous, and orderly communication. Today, we're going to focus on how to effectively communicate your ideas and be heard at public meetings. Our volunteer committee is dedicated to this mission, and you'll meet several members to discuss topics. But today we're going to be focusing on communicating in public meetings. Jen Grayson will introduce hints for participation in presentation techniques at public meetings. Nita Kenyon will offer specific tips on speaking skills. Ann Quinn and Deborah Fioskowski will focus on facts versus fiction and knowing your source. And Kate Christensen will close using listening skills to clarify your message and avoid tense situations. Now, this is a forum during which you're asked to think about a question posed after each topic presentation and to take a minute and enter a response in the Q&A. A listing of takeaway tips will be available along with some other resources on the League website under the Civil Discourse webpage. Next slide, please. I will now turn over the forum to our first presenter, Jen Grayson, who will give you an overview of meeting participation skills and how meetings typically work with presentation tips. Jen?
Thank you, Jean. Today, I'll be providing some context for all the skills that we'll be learning today. We hope that you can take these into your personal life, but also bring them into the public sphere as you get involved in your local government or community groups. The setting I'll be focusing on is the public comment periods of government meetings. Next slide, please. First, you'll want to ask yourself, am I in the right place? Each agency has boundaries to the area that it serves and the services that it provides. This is its jurisdiction. You can find out about an agency's jurisdiction from the About Us or Services section of their website. You can also reach out to staff or elected officials of an agency, and they will be happy to point you in the right direction for finding what you need to find out. Next slide, please. When you find the right meeting to attend, you'll have a few public comment periods during which to make your comments. The first one that you'll probably come across is for items not on the agenda. And although you can speak to things that are not on the agenda at that meeting, your comments should pertain to services or powers that the agency has. So it should be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the agency. The next comment period that you'll come across might be the consent agenda. And these are routine, uncontested items that are taken as a group and not discussed individually. The business items are usually the meat of the meeting, and agencies handle public comment for this section differently. Some agencies provide one public comment period at the beginning of all of the business items, so that you would need to speak about all of the business items you're interested in during one public comment period, which is usually around 3 minutes. Other agencies break it up and allow you to speak to each business item separately at the beginning of that business item. So how much time you have to discuss it, an item that you're there for, will depend on how the agency handles it. And it will change depending on how many people show up for public comment or how controversial the item is. They may change the amount of time that people have, or when in the meeting they schedule or move certain items. So that's something that you can usually find out ahead of time if you were to contact the staff or your elected officials. And then last, people can make public comment for closed session items. These are topics that the board can discuss in private, but the public is still allowed to make public comment before the board discusses the item. Next slide, please. At certain periods, you may have the opportunity to participate remotely in a meeting. And so we just suggest that you take some time to practice the raise hand feature and muting yourself ahead of time with a friend or family member so that you're comfortable when you join the meeting and are making public comment. Next slide, please. So now that you know where to go and what part of the meeting you get to speak at, it is time to start thinking about what you're going to say for your public comment. Next slide. It is definitely helpful to read the meeting materials ahead of time. Agendas come out 72 hours before regular meetings and 24 hours before special meetings, and any supporting documents that the board receives, the public should receive it at the same time. And that is usually available on the agency's website. You can pick it up at the office, the agency's office, or you can find out, you can sign up for an email to be on the email blast for the agendas. So when the agenda does come out, it's good to become familiar with all of the sides of the issue. And you can do that by reading the staff report. The staff has usually explored multiple alternative options for the item and have discussed those alternatives in the staff report. As well, Deb and Anne will be giving us some great tips later for finding some quality sources for supporting our public comments. And then we don't want to forget to practice. It turns out we can nail down our timing by typing out our public comment in 14-point font, double spaced on a page. It takes about 3 minutes to read. And actually, I may have that wrong about the double space. I apologize. I think it's just single space, but 14-point font. And you can use that to practice in front of friends and family ahead of time, so you can get down your timing and really nail down what it is that you want to say. And then after you have your timing down and practiced, you can try a visualization practice, which will give you an opportunity to just, you can sit in your room and close your eyes and just imagine being in the meeting room and sitting in your chairs. And then the chair calling public comment and you getting up and going to the podium and making your public comment and then finishing and sitting down. And it will help when it comes time to be in the meeting. It may lessen some of the anxiety involved, just because essentially you've done it before, because our minds are powerful, and it gives you a chance to kind of work through some of the kinks. Something else that might also help is visiting the meeting room ahead of time, maybe for a meeting that doesn't involve the topic you want to speak about, but will give you an idea of how the seats are set up and where the podium is. And arriving 10 minutes early will also help. Next slide, please. So you've made it to the meeting. When you get there, you want to find 3 things: a comfortable seat, your item on the agenda, and the timer. We'll go through each of those. So finding a comfortable seat, like I mentioned a second ago, when you do your visualization, it might be helpful to think about, where you imagine sitting. Were you sitting in the middle of a row where you'll have to climb over people in order to get to the podium, or were you sitting on the edge of a row so that it was easy to get up and didn't complicate the process of making public comment any more than necessary? When you find your item on the agenda, that will just help you to know how many people will be speaking ahead of time. You can practice some of the active listening skills that Kate will be going through later. And we'll give you an idea of some things that work for public comment and some that don't. And we'll just help you to get more comfortable with the idea of doing it yourself. And then finding the timer. That is important because there are different kinds of timers. Some of them are bright and very helpful. They flash yellow at you or just blink when your time is running out so that you have an idea um, that you're running low on time. But others are more subtle and they are not quite so helpful. And so it's better to know that ahead of time so that you can keep an eye on it and not be shut down by the chair because you've run over your time. And then last, you might consider filling out a speaker slip. These are not required by law, but they are helpful for those taking minutes. If the minute takers include speakers' names in their minutes, it'll help them to spell your name correctly. It might also help the chairperson facilitate a smoother meeting by being able to call names. They have an idea of how many people might want to speak on an item so that they can schedule breaks or the amount of time for public comment. Um, but so it's an optional thing that you can consider. That's why they have them there, to facilitate smoother meetings. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so your time to comment has arrived. We have a few final suggestions for making your comment most effective. The first is to address the meeting chair. So this is oftentimes part of the board rules and procedures and something that the board members are also supposed to do. It just helps facilitate an orderly meeting and reduces personal attacks if, some comments might lean toward that direction. And the next one is to keep to the time limits. And we keep coming back to these time limits. Try to say something new or be quick if someone else has already covered all the topics that you are interested in. You might find a particular aspect of your comment to emphasize if other people have addressed your your support or your lack of support for an item. But there is power in numbers, so it's good to still go up even if everyone has said the same thing that you want to say. Showing up and being there shows the board that there are more people that are interested in the item. And then don't ask questions. So this isn't technically you can ask questions, just don't anticipate a response. And that's because public comment period is not a conversation. It's not a back and forth between the board and the speaker. It, depending on the meeting procedures, after your comment is over, the board may ask clarifying questions, or they can direct their staff to provide resources, but they can't speak to items that aren't on the agenda. And, the public comment period is your 3 minutes to say your piece to the board and not be interrupted. It's a great opportunity. And last, we just want to focus on speaking to the policy and not to people. Even if you dislike the person you're speaking to or about, or you're frustrated about your public comment, or you're expressing frustration in your public comment, your comments will be most persuasive if the board feels like you're a member of the team and trying to find a solution for your community. Next slide. So as we wrap up, we just want to remember that to do their jobs well, board members need input from the public. You provide a unique perspective. Now, as we move on, we'll be exploring skills to improve sharing your perspective most effectively. So as you listen to the rest of the speakers, think about how you can use those skills to be part of the solution. Next slide. Now, before we wrap up, we'd love to hear what tips you might find most helpful for making public comment, or if you're a veteran public commenter, if you have any tips to add, we'd love to hear them. And I'll hand it over to Jean now.
Thank you, Jen. So this is your opportunity to provide some ideas or responses to that Q&A, that question in the Q&A. So I'm going to time ourselves a minute for you to go ahead and make any responses you might like to. All right, we just got a great tip to be sure and rehearse what you're saying so you don't have those oohs and ahs and ums, what am I saying next? So that's a great tip, is to be sure and rehearse verbally and out loud. So thank you very much for that tip. Here's some more. It's useful to practice the comment early so that you can have some eye contact with the people you're addressing. That's another great tip. And appreciate the suggestion of going to the room ahead. That is a very good tip in terms of getting to the room and feeling the layout. Thank you. All right, I think we're ready to go on to our next presentation. So thank you for those comments. Let's go on to our next speaker to hear some specific tips for presenting and preparing in the public. So I'm introducing Nita Kenyon. Nita?
Thank you, Jean. Yes, I'm going to spend some more time talking to you about the development and delivery of your public comment, which is, of course, basically a speech, and cover a little bit some of the tips that have been offered already. But before I begin this high-level overview of the components of a formal speech, I want to talk about two things to keep in mind. First, it's important to remember that our view of the world is not exactly the same as anyone else's. As you can see in this quote from Tony Robbins, to effectively communicate, we must realize that we are all different in the way we perceive the world and use this understanding as a guide to our communication with others. You know, each of our individual views of the world is based on our own past experiences and colored by our deeply held beliefs. As an ancient saying goes, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And because of that, it can be helpful to check for any hidden biases or assumptions that we have so we can be more open to what is actually true. And a second thing to keep in mind is the power of the words we use. Depending on these past experiences that we've each had, certain words can ignite strong emotions in us. And since each of us have these unique experiences, of course, there could be different words that are those buttons for us. So keep those two things in mind as you build your speech. Um, Uniqueness of experience and the power of words. Next slide, please. So, getting your message across. What are the fundamental components of getting your message heard by others? Well, first, a clearly stated content of your message, and then your skill in delivering your message. When composing your message, the first step is to identify your key point. What is your desired outcome? If we're not clear on our key point, our audience won't be either. Once you're clear on your key point, that outcome you desire, you can look for some material that supports that position. Are there credible expert opinions or scientific studies that support this position? Note I said credible. And as been mentioned before, we're going to spend some time later on how to sort fact from fiction in this day and age of misinformation and disinformation. So what experiences have led you to this position and desired outcome? If this is an issue personally affecting you and you can't find anything published, you can just describe how you are impacted by this decision. And also you can ask others what their experiences are. It's always good to have something beyond your personal experience to back up your position, but it may not always be possible. So once you are clear on your central message and you've done your research, you're ready to build the actual text of your speech. Every effective speech has an introduction, the body of the speech, and a conclusion. So what's the introduction about? The main purpose is to get the audience's attention and orient them to your central message. If there's a quote or a statistic that's appropriate, it can serve as a very good opening. And then in the body, this is where you develop your message using your supporting material. You give your audience information to back up, support your position. You can acknowledge different life experiences, but hopefully you can point out where there is agreement. And remember, once again, to focus on issues, not personalities. And finally, you have a conclusion. And this is where you actually summarize what you've told them and leave them with a memorable thought. In other words, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you've told them. Building your message in this way helps you keep the message clear in your mind. And once it's clear in your mind, you can clearly communicate to your audience. Now you're ready to deliver your message. Excuse me. Some key things to remember. Excuse me. Communication is not just about the words. Even though I told you to be careful about the words, it's not just about the words you use, but it includes your tone of voice, the rhythm of your voice, body language, gestures, and eye contact. So you can practice in front of a mirror in addition to the practicing that Jen shared, but practicing in front of friends or family. Maybe you don't have anybody that you can practice in front of. So practicing in a mirror can also be helpful. You can notice how you're holding your body. Is your body open or closed? Are you using gestures that are distracting rather than supportive of your message? Are you lifting your eyes from the page and connecting with your audience? What about the rhythm and tone of your voice? Is your voice well modulated, or are you speaking in a monotone? Are you speaking too fast? Are you shouting? Remember that when you shout at people, they tend to shut you out. In addition to, and instead of practicing in a mirror, as I said, this practice in front of the mirror also allows you time to notice perhaps that maybe the flow of your words aren't coming naturally. That's because when we write something, we don't necessarily speak that way. So you have an opportunity to change the wording a little bit so that it flows naturally, not stilted. And once you have that final product, practice once more to make sure your speech will conclude within the time limits. Remember, sometimes less is more. So to summarize, there are 3 steps to building your speech. First, an introduction that grabs the attention of your audience and orients them to your main point. Second, the body of your speech, where you expand and support why they should agree with you. And finally, you summarize your position in the conclusion. You practice your delivery, remembering to pay attention to your delivery style and making sure you keep within the time limit. So now we are ready for the question for this section. Which speaking skills do you find most helpful for you at this time? And is there anything you would like to try out?
Thank you,
At your
Nita.
practicing.
And this is our time to take a minute and put in some suggestions in the Q&A. And we already have an excellent suggestion. And it said it's very helpful to know, thank you, Debbie, to know in advance what you can cut out of your comments just in case the speaking time gets reduced because there's too many speakers. So you want to really focus on the core point that you have. But any other suggestions? We're ready. Oh, another suggestion is to record yourself when you're practicing and then actually listen to it. That's a great suggestion because that's the tone of voice and the delivery style. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Well, it looks like we might be ready to go on to the next topic. So our next topic is very, very important: fact versus fiction, and know your source. So I would like to introduce Ann Quinn, who will start out this presentation. Ann?
Thanks, Jean. Well, we're here to talk about being more effective in public meetings, and the best way to be effective is to get your facts straight. When we were researching this webinar, we interviewed city clerks throughout SLO County and asked them what were the challenges in civil discourse in public meetings. A consistent answer they gave us was that misunderstandings were often caused by what people read on the social media site next door. And they came into meetings upset about things that weren't true. Nextdoor is a great place to learn about what issues affecting your neighborhood. I can't think of any other way that you might find out. But if you want to speak about them at a public meeting, you need to go a step further. And like Jen said, check the agenda of the board that you're going to address. And next to the agenda, there should be a link to a PDF of the staff report. And the staff report is factual and neutral. And you'll get a lot of facts that you can build your presentation on. This is important because at the quote up here from the former senator from New York, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. Next slide, please. Okay, so we need to get our facts right, but today we can all get so confused by misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. What's the difference? We're going to be reviewing this, but very kind of quickly. We hope to create another webinar just on this subject where we'll get into it in much more depth. So this is just a quick overview, but what is the difference? Let's take a look. Next slide, please. Misinformation is a mistake. It's the sharing of inaccurate information in an unintentional way. Any news source that is willing to publish or state a correction is a news source that can be trusted because they're taking that responsibility. They may make mistakes, but they own up to it. So that's a good sign that that's a credible news source. Next slide, please. But disinformation is different. It's intentional. It's deliberate, false, or misleading information that's intended to confuse. Next slide, please. So this is a little complicated slide that was put together by a woman named Claire Wordle. And I just want to go through it because it shows some of the ways that you can get tripped up by misinformation and disinformation. So I can't do every one, I don't have time, but let's look at the first one, the false connection, when the headline or visuals or captions, they don't support the story. I was really shocked to learn when I started to work at newspapers that a different person writes the headlines than the person that wrote the story. And nowadays, half the time it's just a graphic designer who's creating a headline that fits in a certain space. So if a headline upsets you or worries you, go ahead and read the whole story because the information could actually be really different. The next thing that Ms. Wordle brings out here is false context. So something genuine is shared with an artificial misinformation, disinformation story. So a good example of this were the astronauts. This was trending last summer. Apparently there's a conspiracy theory that the astronauts never really went to the moon. So they showed this picture of astronauts in a lunar vehicle, but they had no protective suits on. They had no oxygen. That was supposed to be proof that they didn't really go to the moon. In fact, it was a real photo from the NASA website, but it was of a training photo of these astronauts when they were in the Southwest desert practicing. So you get something genuine that's paired with disinformation. And then manipulated content is probably the most insidious, and that is manipulated and intended to deceive. According to one of our favorite fact-checking websites, Snopes.com, on April Fool's Day, someone took the Tesla logo that kind of looks like a modern, very modern T, and they turned it upside down and they put little eye holes in it so it looked like a Ku Klux Klan mask. Well, that was manipulating imagery, but it got 15 million views. And lastly, the only last one I want to talk about is satire or parody, because a lot of people have different senses of humor and not everyone realizes when someone's joking. Next slide, please. So that's basically the message that we want to give right now is if you suspect it's fake news, just don't pass it on. Now I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Deb Fielkowski, and she's going to give you more tips on how to recognize fake news.
Thanks, Anne. So now that we know what misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda is, how do we stop it? How do we spot it? Especially important if you're giving a fact-based presentation. Now, you may think it's easy, according to this slide, but it's a little more involved. Misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda aren't new, although propaganda has been rechristened as malinformation. But what is new is that we have rapidly changing technology, and that also includes the manner of how news is disseminated. We've gone from print to radio to TV to internet. In addition to news, we now have social media. And a lot of sites and a lot of stories have gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. There was actually something on the internet not too long ago that got a lot of traction that claimed that high schools were putting in kitty litter boxes into bathrooms because they found some students were gender identifying themselves as cats. Now, clearly, we all think that's crazy, but it gained some traction because people just passed it on. Basically, what we're dealing with here is technology coupled with manipulation. Studies have found that where information conflicts with our viewpoint, some people will accept the disinformation and not change their minds, regardless of how much you try to tell them otherwise. Making it more difficult is the fact that we now have artificial intelligence, and it's compounding the situation because of its lightning fast speed. It compiles an opinion, essentially, or a statement of fact from a variety of sources, but it doesn't fact check those sources. So some of the sources it uses may be based on faulty information, disinformation, or even made up information. Some websites and news authorities now have fact-checking of their own. Some also have an AI summary. But if you look at those AI summaries, you will see that quite often it's labeled as an experiment, because even the media isn't quite sure how reliable AI is. So why is it important that if you're giving a public presentation, you need to identify and weed out fake news? Democracies are based on self-governance, and that depends on an informed electorate. Knowledge can be a powerful tool. Disinformation can also, unfortunately, be a powerful tool. An informed electorate is one that is engaged and participates in public forums and discussions. Use of the internet has made people more isolated and more disengaged, and surrendering instead to whatever sources and whatever news they happen to find on the internet. This may not be reliable. So what this slide tells you is the first thing to do is to trust your gut. Do a gut check. If it feels wrong, it's likely wrong. Fake news, as Nita mentioned, is often designed to elicit a very strong emotion, whether it's fear, whether it's joy, whether it's anger. But if what you're reading doesn't feel right, then trust your gut and don't rely on it. But make sure that in doing so, You also look to see if your bias, your own personal bias, may be interfering with your ability to see things clearly. There's an old saying if you've ever been called for jury duty, that you leave your personal biases at the courtroom door, but not your common sense. That rule is good to follow. Because when you talk about your biases, you will find that the internet plays and manipulates those biases. What they do is they find out what you like and what you don't like, and then they feed you more of that. If you've ever clicked on a share or a like, that results in filters. And depending on what the information is, you will be fed more of it, whether it's good or whether it's bad. It gets rid of anything that's non-conforming, even though it may be more accurate. So trust that you're going to be able to identify your own biases, whether you recognize them or not. It's sometimes difficult, and use that as part of your gut check. Next slide, please. We have fact checking. That's the second part of the previous slide. There are a number of sites, and as Jean mentioned, some of those are posted on the webpage for the Civil Discourse section of the League. Wikipedia also has a link on its site to various fact-checking sites, and it narrows it down to continent, to country, and to locality. The problem with some of the fact-checking sites are that they don't use standard methodology. And this is problematical because what might be considered fake news on one site might not be considered fake news on another site. So in 2015, the Poynter Institute started an international nonpartisan organization which provides for ethical certification of fact checkers. There's 31 different criteria that they have to meet. But if they get this certification, and you will see it when you're checking on the news sites, that you know that then they're reliable. So you also have to look at the fact-checking sites because some only follow certain areas, such as politics or politicians. And even worse, some fact-checking sites are fake themselves, and they're designed to support the fake news that you may have been trying to confirm or stop. Another thing that is important is to look at items. I'm not going to read through these, but Breaking News Consumer's Handbook. There are a number of little red flags that you can look at to see whether or not what you're reading is in fact truthful, whether it's a spin, whether it's half a lie, whether it's a full lie, whether it's designed to evoke an emotion, or whether it's designed to lead you astray. So what you can do is look at some general sites. Of course, Snopes is one of the big ones. And like I said, we do have a page on the League website that shows some of those fact-checking organizations. Wikipedia is not a fact-checking website, although they do have a link to one. Wikipedia also, like AI, compiles information from a number of sources. While they do provide a link, a lot of their information may be outdated. So don't use them as a fact-checking site. Similarly, don't use AI as a fact-checking site because it is not. AI is designed, as are a number of sites, to increase viewership, which in turn increases revenue. Look at podcasts. Sometimes podcasts can be very factual, they can be educational. Other times they are simply someone's opinion, and it's including their own biases. Look out for social media influencers, because those are people who gain prominence on sites, and they are designed to give their opinion and promote a sponsor by promoting their agenda. Look to see whether or not the story has a reputable outlet outlet repeating the same thing. Media these days has become more corporate. Declining news budgets, fewer news outlets, outlets that have been purchased by wealthy individuals who are promoting their own agendas, can skew or spin facts or provide alternate facts rather than simply report them. So look at those types of things when you are trying to determine if something you're reading is fake or true. Finally, if you're not sure it's true, as everyone has said, don't share it. Next slide, please. This slide is on the website. And the main thing I would say is on this one is to check the author. The author may, him or herself, be a construct, an invention. Sometimes the author is real, but what they cite as supporting evidence for their position is not. You almost have to do a lateral search for that. Sometimes the author is simply repeating a rumor, and those can go viral, especially if the author has some celebrity status or is a person in a position of authority. People tend to believe and find it credible when the author is someone who has public prominence. Finally, when all else fails, type in whatever the person is, whatever the news is, the headline, the quote, or the author that you're trying to confirm, and follow that with the word fake. And then hit enter on your search engine. And remember, social media sites are not a search engine. In fact, sites like X and Facebook, formerly or now Meta, have specifically said that they are no longer doing fact checking. So it's now up to us to do this. Next slide, please. So our main job and your main job when you're presenting facts to a public body is to learn how to consume media responsibly in this new era. You don't want to be the person who's responsible for passing on a rumor or bad information. Next slide, please. So for your consideration, I mentioned that some social media sites are not fact-checked any longer. Should they be? Back to Jean to give you some further information on this.
So here's your chance to put in any comment you'd like to put in the Q&A. But before we go on to this, a great comment was suggested in terms of presentation. And when you're presenting something, it was suggested that you look at the person's forehead rather than the eyes, because it might reduce some nervousness. So that was a great tip in terms of presenting. But let's go back to this social media and fact checking. And is it fact or fiction? Any comments, please? Well, this particular presentation was full of lots of information. And as Anne mentioned, we're working on a full program that's just going to be looking at fact versus fiction. So thank you for your attention. And I see one question. Do you have a list of fact-checking sites that we can use? And we do have some of that on our website. So please go to the League of Women Voters Civil Discourse webpage. So now we're ready to go to our last presentation, and this is listening skills. So you're going to be using your listening skills to clarify your message and avoid tense situations. Our last presenter, Kate.
Thank you, Jean. And thanks to everybody who went before. Yes, in the next 10 minutes, I am going to help you to listen in a way that will allow you to clarify your message, your own perspective, and avoid or handle those tense situations. Next page. So I'm talking about a different kind of listening. First of all, just set aside your goal of changing somebody's mind. We're not going to do it in one conversation. So I'm asking you to listen in a way that you're really, really interested. You really want to understand. Be intent on hearing something that you can connect with. Is there anything that you can agree with? Appreciate, anything you can acknowledge. Is there anything, true in that? Determine what is important to both of you. What could be important to both of you? And be open to learning something new. This is really hard. You might be changed by what you hear. Ultimately, care about the connection. Be caring. Be respectful. Be empathetic. What you're really doing is building trust. Listening deeply, you can connect with human needs we all share. Next page. So, we all need physical safety and security, and we need emotional security. We need to be free from fear. We all need autonomy. We need freedom and choice. We have a deep need for understanding, to understand others and to be understood. There is a need for meaning in our lives and our human dignity and respect. We all need that. And believe it or not, we all are social creatures and we need connection and appreciation. So it's not that hard. We're all human. Next page. So it's not that hard to make this shift. I'm talking about listening for understanding, just really trying to understand. This is not a debate. You're not going to win. You're not going to be right. Conflict is not bad. In fact, conflict is absolutely natural. We all are unique, as was said earlier, we all have our perspective based on everything in our lives. And so it's natural. And there is common ground. We have common ground. We are all human, and we won't have to look that far to find it. So as we listen in this way, we're building up our trust account, and we need that to be able to share our perspective. Next page. So here's the technique. I love this. It's called LAPSI. It's A for listening. It is up. L, I would say L for listening. A, you're going to appreciate, acknowledge, so you can connect, agree. And then there's a P. I say it softly. It's a P for pivot. You're really going to ask for permission to share your perspective, the second P. And then always close with connection, lapsy. Okay, let's try this out. Next page. First of all, you're going to listen. Remain calm. Check your biases. Avoid your own reactivity. Listen in a way that you're really looking to find something you can agree with, acknowledge, appreciate. Think about, what does this person really need or want? What do they want me to understand? What do they want me to understand? And what is important to both of us? What is it that we both care about? So you're going to get ready to respond rather than react. You're going to respond and connect and find that common ground. Okay, next page. So I am a responsible gun owner, and I respect the need for a safe. I teach my children how to use and care for the guns. I want them to know how to use a gun for target practice, and if they had to, for defense. It's only a few mentally ill people that cause the problem. And I just don't want to see the right to have a gun be taken away. This is a constitutional right, and I will not give up my freedom. It'll take about 10 seconds and see if there's anything you could agree with or acknowledge or appreciate. about this perspective. Okay, it's not that hard, is it? Next page. You know, I think I do really connect with the safety issue. I grew up with guns myself, and I've been to target practice with family and friends. I really connect with, I get that this is part of your family culture. I really connect and appreciate that you're teaching your family how to use and care for guns and be safe. You know, one thing that makes a lot of sense about what you said um, is this idea that, you know, I think it really is a relatively few number of people where we cause the problems. Just think about all of the responsible gun owners like yourself. And, you know, I get it. It seems to me that we all need to feel um, secure, you know, that we have a need, we need physical safety, and we need to be free from fear. We need emotional safety. It seems to me that having a gun and knowing how to use it actually makes you feel safer and your family safer. I get it. I have similar thoughts around this idea that it is a few people that cause the problems. You know, and you're absolutely right that it is a constitutional amendment. Next page. So I'm ready to pivot because I want to share my perspective, but I'm not expecting to change their mind. Um, you know, I'm amazed. I actually would agree with so much. I mean, that you said. Would it be okay if I share my perspective on this? Now, I want to make sure I have agreement, a nod, a yes. Okay. I want to make sure that when I share my perspective, you know, it's not falling on deaf ears. And if I don't get that permission, I'm going to circle back and do some more active, curious listening, and then try again to see if I can share my perspective. Next page. So, you know, we share so many of the same ideas on so many aspects of the gun issue. My perspective is that we do have an obligation to keep guns out of the hands of the people who should not have them. And one way to do this is through background checks. And, you know, I know it won't completely solve the problem, but it is a step that we can take together for the safety of more people. Next page. Now, that the conversation could be going on, but you know I'm not going to change someone's mind, and I really want to keep the trust growing. So I want to close with connection. I'm not going to solve this all in one day. So I want to close with connection. I really appreciate this conversation. You know, you've really expanded my view on this topic. There's so much that we actually share on this. I really have enjoyed it, and I thank you, and I hope that we can talk again sometime about this issue or another issue. Sometimes, you know, we need an exit strategy. So next page, please. There are some graceful ways to exit. So I could say like, okay, you know, it seems that we see this a little differently. You know, maybe we should just leave this for now. I'm going to give a lot of thought to some of the things that you've said. And you might just have to resort to, you know, okay, I've got to go. But always, always, always try to end with that connection. So, you know, you might offer, you know, really was a great conversation. I really appreciate it. You know, I know that conflict is natural and we're all individuals. We have our individual perspective, and I just enjoy being able to talk it through. So thank you so much. next page. So, what listening tips did you hear that will help you with these sort of conversations and tense situations? Because, you really want to be able to share your own perspective. And do you have any other tips that work for you? Thank you so much. Jean, take it away.
Thank you, Kate. And we have a really good tip that just came in. And one of them was, "This is really good," from Debbie. "My pride prevents me from being willing to do this, but I will try." What a great comment. I'm looking at our time, so we're at the very conclusion. And thank you, Kate, again. Our objective was for each of you to learn some techniques to how to effectively communicate your ideas and be heard at public meetings. And we offered tips for meeting participation, speaking, getting your facts straight, listening skills, and we asked you several questions to ponder. So now, is there anything that you heard today that you might want to put into practice, inspire you, or you'd like to share? We have like 2 minutes. Oh my goodness. Let's go. Oh, we just got a message that says all of these ideas are great. Thank you. Any other messages? Oh, another message is coming in. Thank you very much. Very helpful information. Well, in the interest of time, I think we'd like to go to our final slide, which is a thank you. Thank you for your attendance and your participation. We welcome responses to continually improve our forum, and we really want to thank our presenters that did an excellent job and our tech masters. Thank you very much.